When you start studying ancient human history and the origins of humankind, and we in South Africa see ourselves as the experts in the origins of humankind because we tell the whole world that we live in the cradle of humankind. And for those of you that have never been to South Africa, that's all you see everywhere you go, cradle of humankind, cradle of humankind. But what they do is they cause a lot of confusion with these signs because they take you off to the wrong places. They take you off to Sterkfontein Caves and to this wonderful sort of Disney world of cradle of humankind called Marupeng. It's beautifully put together, but they do cause a lot of confusion because they start showing you what is still regarded as the theory of evolution, and they sell it to you as fact. And I have a bit of a problem with that. But anyway, that's another presentation for another day. So when you start studying the origins of humankind and ancient human history and ancient civilizations, I'm sure many of you will be aware of this. It doesn't take long before you realize that something doesn't quite fit, and some large pieces of the puzzle are missing. And you've got to go outside of the establishment and the textbooks. You've got to go out to crazy places like this, where you find the authors and the researchers that are writing and working outside of the established academic areas, to find really some very interesting scientific research and information. And it's really on that basis that many scholars and authors have been writing for decades, actually hundreds of years, and in fact, when you go a lot further back in time, for thousands of years, scholars and writers have been writing about this first and ancient civilization of humans that lived at the bottom tip of Africa, the southern tip of Africa. But all of this has been written about from extracts of ancient texts and scripts and Sumerian tablets and this and that and folklore, but very little physical evidence has ever been presented. And it's really this, our discoveries in South Africa of the last 7 years, and especially the last 3 years when I got involved with Jan Heine, when we started making these discoveries that pretty much blew our minds and forced us on a daily and weekly basis to reconsider everything we thought we knew about our human history. The last email, for example, I got from Professor Paul Van Ward from Harvard University. He sent me his amazing book, God's Genes and Consciousness, who writes extensively about this first civilization of advanced beings who lived at the southern tip of Africa. And so it goes, just to mention one. But what we do know is that the Sumerian tablets keep telling us some of these very important things. And it's up to us to decide if we're going to believe it or not. Now, I have no doubt whatsoever that the ancient civilizations had a lot better things to do than to sit and try and write down a bunch of bull to try and confuse future generations about what it is that they knew. Okay, and this is where I have a real problem with the sort of the divided approach that some academics have. They'll tell us that we've learned everything we know today from the Sumerians, archaeology, agriculture, astronomy, architecture, medicine, law, etc. We pretty much got from the Sumerians. But when it comes to some of the more weird and esoteric stuff, I say, oh no, they must have been drunk when they wrote that. But, well, you must decide, do you believe this stuff or don't you? And I don't think we can have this divided approach to the ancient texts. And these tablets tell us very clearly what was going on in ancient times, where the first people lived, what they did, why they did it, who created them, where did they come from, and all these things. And it suddenly paints a completely different picture from what we find in our textbooks. And I must tell you, one of the most common emails I get from people from all over the world, and I'm talking hardcore academics, is, I love your work, I love your research, it's really wonderful, exciting stuff, but I can't support you on an official basis because I might lose my job. Now, that's not the kind of academic fraternity we'd like to see evolving around us. And I hope that as this information comes out, people start looking at this, especially from the academic world, with a more serious approach, because it definitely deserves that. Just to show you two beautiful examples of Sumerian tablets. The one on the left is a Sumerian tablet, one of the kings list that's been found. And this one talks about a time period of 212,000 years. It names the kings that ruled for 8 8 kings that ruled before the flood over a period of 212,000 years. Now, these are periods that our archaeologists and historians just do not want to deal with. Okay, the more popular Sumerian king list is the one on the right. That goes even further. That names over 130 kings, 10 of whom ruled before the flood over a period of 224,000 years. And we start seeing that these ancients had information that somehow was hidden or lost or consciously removed from our body of knowledge and information. And then we start finding the ancient ruins of southern Africa. Well, the current belief is that southern Africa was a sparsely populated place with very few inhabitants before 1,000 years ago. And the emphasis is on very few inhabitants. We're talking a few thousand. That's it. A bunch of hunter-gatherers that ran around, did nothing better to do than shoot some buck and, make some biltong and have a party. I don't know, just somehow survive and make pictures on cave walls and things. And that's what we're told. Pick up the history books, that's what they'll tell you. Well, fortunately for us, the stone ruins of South Africa and Southern Africa tell us a completely different story. These stone structures that we've been discovering are often called cattle kraal, of little historic value. Once again, this is the most common reference you'll find in the history books and the academic books on these. And some of the references are so preposterous that you actually wonder how these people got their degrees. I'm going to take you through some of them. The one thing we need to embrace as well is that ancient civilizations had a body of knowledge and information that we've long lost. And we've got to stop assuming that we are the pinnacle of civilization because we got cell phones. Okay, that does not constitute civilization. And there are ways and means of getting information across and sharing information using other types of technology that we don't quite understand. Well, the first thing you'll note about the stone ruins of southern Africa is they're all circular. They're all circular. They all have internal structures, sometimes very complex, sometimes very simple. And sometimes they have these little weird attachments on the outside of the stone structures. But the most important thing to take note of is that they're all unique. Each and every one of them is completely unique. And in the longer presentations, I go into great detail why that is so. Some of the walls are still 3 meters high and 2 meters wide. Some of them are really complex, and you can see great destruction that happened at some distant time in history that caused the sudden disappearance of this vast civilization. Very importantly to note that some of them also, or many of them, show the sort of spiderweb effect that goes out from the central stone structure. And that's very important to note. It's not just the stone walls of the central structure that are so impressive. It's the stuff around it that's eroded and gone, that's disappeared, that's lying beneath meters of soil. There's a very good example of a very simple structure with a simple central circle. And then you start seeing the more complex ones. These weird little internal structures that are 1.2, 1.5 meters in diameter. Absolutely no idea what they were used for. This is a very important stone circle. It's one of the first ones that was measured and sort of understood by Johann Heine, who's the main sort of instigator and the guy that kept insisting that these structures are not just cattle kraal, that they have a much larger importance in human history. Johann is actually originally started photographing many of these from the air about 20 years ago and was responsible for bringing this to the attention of the South African Archaeological Institution and so forth. But he's just been completely ignored. And then you start seeing some really interesting shapes, like on the left-hand side there you can see that weird horseshoe shape with a perfect circle in the middle, and the little towers at the entrance to the horseshoe shape. And these suddenly start to re-emerge over and over again. Look again, once again, it's not just the main structure to look at, but it's the greater area around it that is gone and eroded. That looks like a very complex spider's web. There you see, this is some of the ruins that are in the Sapi, the forestry areas. Thousands and thousands of ruins have been destroyed by the forestry industry. And some have been protected and remain, which is a good thing. It seems that SAPI has finally woken up and realized that they need to protect some of these ruins. And we've started with the Makamati Foundation, which I'm a member of. That was started in 2003. We started protecting some of these ruins that fall in the SAPI areas. And there's another one of those horseshoe, interesting shapes of the pillars. And this one is inside a much larger structure. And there you got a nice aerial view from the helicopter we took. If you look carefully on the left-hand side, you'll notice that there were many more structures in between. It didn't end with this one in the foreground and that one over there. It once was an ongoing settlement of many, many more structures that just never ended. Very important thing to note, which you probably didn't notice, is there's no doors and entrances. This is one of the anomalies and the big mysteries that our archaeological friends, when they go and excavate these, which hasn't really been happening on a large scale at all, one of the first things they always mention is there are no doors and no entrances, and this is a real mystery. What the hell were these things used for if there aren't any doors or entrances? And then we get to realize that we're dealing with what we now know, not just speculate on, we know this for a fact. This is the largest and most mysterious ancient stone settlement on earth, and consists of dwellings, workplaces, places of worship, ancient roads. These roads run for thousands and thousands of kilometers. And terraces, agricultural terraces that cover more than 450,000 square kilometers. This is not a quick something that you throw together while you're a hunter-gatherer or migrant laborer moving down from the north trying to find new pastures. This is a serious, ongoing engineering feat of proportions that we cannot find anywhere else in the world. As I said, the agricultural terraces run for thousands of kilometers. They seem to have been designed for crops and livestock. And then you've got to ask yourself, to feed how many people? In this sparsely populated subcontinent, what the hell were all these thousands of kilometers of terraces all about? The numbers just do not make sense. There's just a few examples of some of these terraces. This terrace, for example, was an archaeological friend of mine at the University of Pretoria told me with absolute certainty, well, this is at least 5,000 years old, but probably a lot older, just studying the erosion patterns on this. And he said, but if you quote me, I'll deny it. So I said, okay, I'll quote you, but I won't mention your name. And then you start realizing this is incidentally all near the area of Watervalboven, the town that I've now moved to and live and do all my research in, because most of the densely visible structures are there. So it's very easy to access, drive up the mountain in your 4x4 and spend days and days there studying these things. Then you suddenly realize that the entire mountains are just a continuation of terraces, interspaced with circles and roads and other strange, weird shapes that we haven't quite figured out. I'll go into a lot more detail again in the longer presentations. Here's a spectacular example of terraces, circles, and ancient roads running straight up the mountain all the way down to the river. And then pay attention to the bottom left-hand corner. That's what I call the strange hexagonal kind of beehive honeycomb effect. That is a very, very important piece of the puzzle that we get into in great detail. This looks like you're somewhere in South America in Machu Picchu and not the hills of Watervalboven, South Africa. And we start to realize that something strange has been going on that we have absolutely no idea of. And then we get to the strange anomaly of these ancient roads. These thousands and thousands of miles, and I can tell you that every one of these stone circles in its original form was attached to one of these ancient roads. We originally called them roads. Later on, we now call them channels because we realized they weren't really roads. They were for something completely different. The most important thing to realize is that when these channels enter the stone circle, there are no doors and no entrances. So once again, it's this big mystery. What is this all about? And did you notice that spider's web effect again? All the way down. So you got this stone structure at the top of the hill, and all the way down the hill, you got the spider's web effect interspaced with other terraces and other stone circles, all connected. There you can see the road links from the top. By the way, when you walk on these ruins, many of these ruins, you have no idea that you are standing in the middle of the ruins. You need to see it from the air to realize where you are, that you're actually standing among all these amazing structures. And there's a spectacular example. And this is also these set of photographs are also very important because they show the effect of water, large amounts of water that has caused a lot of damage to these. That's another thing we get into in great detail. But it's very important to look carefully at some of these photographs because we get some very important geological evidence of what happened here in the past, in the distant past. Another example of the road cutting through some terraces up the mountain, and so it goes. This is a beautiful effect. Just because you can't see ruins to the top and to the bottom of the road doesn't mean that they are not there. They are there in large numbers. They're just covered by meters of soil. And once again, on the left-hand side, you get that weird cluster of hexagonal shapes. Hexagonal stone clusters, beehive effect. No way to get into the middle of them, but there they are, clustered together. Very strange things going on here. There's a beautiful example. Note, there's no doors or entrances. It's just this one continuous structure of stone. That's spectacular. Now imagine the entire southern Africa looking something like this a long, long, long time ago. And that's pretty much what we're dealing with here. There's another one of those sets photographs where you can see the effects of water moving in one specific direction. What's it all about? Always about gold. That's one thing that you cannot separate from human history is gold. Man's obsession with gold, but even more importantly, man's God's obsession with gold. Every ancient civilization, whenever the colonialists arrived there and they found this abundance of gold, and they asked the locals, who does the gold belong to? What was the answer? Always the same answer. The gold belongs to the gods. Something weird was going on here. Wherever there are stone circles, there are gold mines. Oh, surprise, surprise. And we have walked through hundreds of these ancient gold mines. Hopefully you can see the stone circles there with terraces. There are at least 8 circles there, beautiful terraces. Remember, a lot of soil covering these structures. You can hardly see them anymore. Just to show you some of these gold mines that you find right up to the side of the mountain, into the sides of the mountains, there are hundreds, if not thousands of them. In one day, I'll probably walk through close to 100 of these mines. What's interesting about this, then in the mid-1800s, when the gold rush happened in South Africa, these gold mines were all reopened by the gold explorers, and I believe that they weren't actually created as new mines. They just reopened these ancient mines that these ancient civilizations were mining a long, long time ago. And for those of you who like orbs, here's a nice picture for you. To show you that even the orbs are interested in the ancient cultures and our gold mining activities. And there's a spectacular shaft. It's strangely enough, we don't know how deep this is. It's at least 100 meters deep. I was very nervous sitting next to it there. On the right, you can see what it looks like from the air, and it goes all the way down. It's probably about 5 miles away from what is still the richest gold mine in the world today, Sheba Gold Mine. Do you think they knew something we don't? And then we find the brilliant Anne Kritzinger. I think she's the head of geology at Zimbabwe University. About 3 years ago or so, she wrote a spectacular paper. Remember, these ruins carry on right throughout South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Mozambique, and across the Zambezi even further north. Until recently, because of the lack of information and research, these so-called circular structures in many of the Zimbabwe-type ruins were called slave pits and animal pits and grain pits, because that's the frame of reference. You know, they must have been slave pits. They must have been for animals or grain. Well, it's such a bunch of rubbish that it's laughable. So the brilliant Anne Kritzinger went and she wrote this amazing paper. She shows conclusively that these were flotation extraction tanks for gold. You can find her paper online and read through it. It is a wonderful read.
Yeah.